He sold it for $40,000. $40,000. I sat in my chair by the window when David called to tell me, and I did not say anything for a long time. He thought the line had dropped. He said, "Dad." "Are you there?" I said. "I am here." He said, "I know it is not what you hoped. The market was difficult and the offers were not coming, and he needed to move on with his life, and $40,000 was the best he could get for it." I said, "I understand." I did not understand. Not that day. Not for a long time after that day. The business I spent 30 years building. The thing I chose over dinners and weekends and David's debate competitions and Margaret's request to go to Italy and 1,000 ordinary Tuesday evenings that I told myself I would make up for later. $40,000, less than I earned in a single year at the firm in 1992. I hung up the phone. I sat in my chair. I looked out the window at the street going from morning to midday. And I thought about a Tuesday in April of 1971. I was 27 years old. I want to take you back to that Tuesday because that is where this story actually starts. Not with the $40,000. Not with the phone call. Not with David's voice on the line saying, "I know it is not what you hoped." With a Tuesday in April of 1971 and a 27-year-old man who had just decided he was going to build something of his own. My name is Harold Voss. I am 84 years old. My heart is running at 38%, and I have been trying to understand the $40,000 for 3 years. Today, I think I finally do. Before I go any further, I want to ask you something. What is the thing you are building right now that you believe will outlast you? Not a legacy in the abstract sense. Something specific. A business, a body of work, a reputation. Something you are investing years of your life into because you believe it will still exist and still matter after you are gone. Write it in the comments. Just the thing. One word or one sentence. Because what I am about to tell you is not a story about failure. It is a story about what we build things for, and whether we ever stop to ask that question before we spend 30 years answering it the wrong way. In April of 1971, I was working as a junior engineer at a mid-sized firm in Cincinnati. I had been there 4 years. I was good at the work. My reviews were strong. The senior partners liked me. The trajectory was clear and predictable and entirely controlled by other people's decisions about when and whether to promote me. I hated that part. Not the work, the dependency. I was 27 years old, and I had grown up watching my father spend 30 years being dependent on a factory floor that could have closed on any given morning and taken everything with it. I had decided at 17 that I was never going to be that dependent on something I did not control. So I started planning. Not immediately, not recklessly. I spent 3 more years at the firm learning everything I could learn from the people who were better than me. I saved money carefully for the first and only extended period in my adult life. I talked to Margaret about it for a year before I did anything. She said, "Harold, if you are going to do it now while we are young enough to recover if it goes wrong." That was the most useful piece of advice anyone ever gave me about the business. In 1974, I left the firm. I rented a small office on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled permanently of the printing company on the ground floor. I bought a second-hand drafting table and 2 filing cabinets and a telephone, and I started calling every contact I had accumulated in 4 years at the firm. In the first 6 months, I earned less than half of what I had been earning at the firm. Margaret worked extra shifts at the school. We ate simply. We worried constantly. We had conversations at the kitchen table at 10 o'clock at night that were honest in a way that our conversations would not be again for many years. Those 6 months were some of the most frightening of my life. They were also some of the best. I want to stop here because this is important. The business I built in 1974 was built by a Harold I genuinely liked. A Harold who was frightened and honest and fully present in his own life in a way that the senior partner Harold of 1992 was not. The 1974 Harold sat at the kitchen table at 10 o'clock at night and talked to Margaret about real things, about the client who had not paid, about the project that was going badly, about whether they were going to be all right. She knew everything, every number, every setback, every win. She was inside the building with me in those early years. And somewhere in the years that followed, as the business grew and the clients became larger and the reputation became established, and the Harold who had been frightened and honest became the Harold who was confident and managed. She got moved to the outside, not deliberately, just gradually. The way everything important happened gradually. The business stopped being something we were building together and became something I was maintaining on her behalf. And I stopped being the Harold I liked and became the Harold who handled things. Here is the first specific thing I got wrong. I confused the building with the purpose. In 1974, the purpose was clear. Build something independent. Earn the right to control my own professional destiny. Create work that reflected my own standards and my own judgment rather than someone else's. That purpose was real, and it was good, and it drove the first 10 years of the business with a clarity that produced genuinely excellent work. But somewhere around the mid-80s, the purpose shifted without my noticing. The building became the purpose. Not what the building was for. Not what it was producing. Not what it meant to the people inside it or the clients it served or the family it was supposed to be providing for. Just the building itself. The growth, the revenue, the reputation, the next client, the next project, the next level. I stopped asking what the business was for and started treating the business as the answer to every question. What are you working toward, Harold? The business. What are you sacrificing these evenings for, Harold? The business. Why are you not at David's debate, Harold? The business. The business became the explanation for everything and the justification for everything and eventually the replacement for everything that was not the business. Margaret told me in '98 that she had been lonely for 11 years. The business was 11 years old in '87. I have done that arithmetic many times. The second specific thing I got wrong. I built it for the wrong kind of permanence. I wanted the business to outlast me. I wanted to hand something to David that would still be there and still be running and still be worth something after I was gone. That is not an unreasonable thing to want, but I built it in a way that made it entirely dependent on me. My relationships with clients, my reputation in the industry, my specific way of approaching problems that I had never fully codified or transferred or made into something that could exist independently of Harold Voss showing up every morning and being Harold Voss. When I retired, the business did not have an engine anymore. It had a Harold-shaped hole where the engine used to be. David tried. He genuinely tried. He spent 3 years working with clients who had been mine for 20 years and who tolerated him because of their relationship with me and who left one by one as that tolerance expired. He was not failing. He was trying to run an engine that required a specific person to function, and that person was no longer there. That is not something he did wrong. That is something I built wrong. I built a business around myself instead of building a business that could survive me. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a legacy and a dependency. What I handed David was not a business. It was a dependency with my name on it. Here is my first question for today. If you disappeared from whatever you are building tomorrow, not retired, not transitioned, just gone, how long would it survive without you? A year, a month, a week? Write the honest answer in the comments. Not the answer you want it to be. The honest one. Because the gap between those two answers is the gap between what you think you are building and what you are actually building. The third specific thing I got wrong. I never asked David if he wanted it. Not once in 30 years did I sit down with my son and ask him directly whether he wanted to inherit a business, whether engineering was something he cared about, whether the specific thing I had spent my life building was something he had any desire to continue. I assumed. I assumed because it was easier than asking, because asking might have produced an answer I was not ready for, because the version of the future in which David took over the business and it continued to exist and grow after I was gone was the version that made the 30 years feel worth it. So I did not ask. I just built toward that version. And David, who is a kind and dutiful son, did not tell me he did not want it. He told me when he sold it. Not in those words. David does not say things in those words. But in the phone call. In the flatness of his voice when he said the market was difficult and the offers were not coming and 40,000 was the best he could get. That was not the voice of a man who had failed to sell something he wanted to keep. That was the voice of a man who had finally found a way to put down something he had been carrying for 3 years out of love for a father who had never thought to ask him if he wanted to carry it. I understood that 3 days after the phone call, sitting in my chair by the window, watching the street, thinking about a 27-year-old in a third-floor office that smelled of ink who had been so frightened and so honest and so fully alive in his own life. And thinking about what that 27-year-old would have said if someone had told him that the thing he was about to spend 30 years building would be sold for $40,000 by a son who never wanted it, I think he would have said, "Then what am I building it for?" That is the question I want to leave you with today. Not how to build something that lasts, not how to create a legacy, just that one question. What are you building it for? Not the answer you give when someone asks at a dinner party. The real one. The one that is true at 10 o'clock at night at the kitchen table when the work is hard and the client has not paid and you are asking yourself whether any of this is worth what it is costing. What is it for? If you know the answer, write it in the comments. If you do not know the answer, write that instead. I am not done yet.